Thank you, and welcome back, everyone, through the magic of digital tools. We're now convening here in our studio at Georgetown University, and we've had a wonderful set of conversations already, and we're going to close out with two additional sections of the program, a conversation with Chris Leinberger. And Chris, thank you very much for making time to be with us.
Anything you would want, you get.
Oh, Chris. And then we'll follow this session with an open dialogue with our partners, and look forward to that interactive conversation before we close. Chris, thanks for being with us. And we've spent this fall conducting workshops. You've just heard from the previous conversation. We're talking with stakeholders around the world through the power of Zoom, South Africa and the Middle East. We heard from Greg Clark this morning. I do want to explore these issues of place and economics a little bit more, and to really explore and understand the kind of operations and impact of these place management organizations in the economics of the city, in that context. And so much of your work has been deeply, deeply insightful into thinking about how these walkable places emerge within cities. If we have a kind of historic, deeply historic lens of looking at cities, certainly the pre-industrial city was a walkable city. But the reality is that certainly in the United States, and not just limited to the United States, so many metropolitans or places around the world are built on the automobile.
Yep.
And urban planners globally are trying to come to terms with this. There are many different strategies, but your work has really explored how these places emerge as walkable urban places. And the first question I have for you is, are these walkable urban places dependent upon a place management organization existing to help them transform in that way, or do the economics kind of play out on their own? So what is this kind of relationship between these place management organizations and the emergence of walkable urban places?
Let me give you two analogies. One is that place management is the fifth level of governance in our society.
Yeah.
National, state or province, regional, metro, and then city, town, village. But then the fifth is place. Here in Metro DC, we have 41 walkable urban places. They average about 310 acres each, so about 100 hectares. And virtually all of them are being managed. And just like you would never have a city and say, oh, we don't need to manage the city. The trash will take care of itself naturally, and public safety, not a problem. You absolutely need to manage it and consciously manage it. And we have a number of different models by which we do this, because this was just invented 40, 50 years ago up in Toronto. So we are still learning as we go. But place management, if you're a student right now, get into place management. I mean, you are at the beginning of something that is really big. Think about the fact that 50 years ago, if they had invented city management 50 years ago, now would be a good time to get into city management, because it's going to be around for centuries. So it's crucial. The other parallel is, take a regional mall, 1.5 million square feet of space, 100,000 square meters, and it's filled with one product type: retail, only retail.
Right.
And there's a retail property manager who is full-time, 24/7, focused on keeping that place running. A place is so much more complex than a one-purpose regional mall. And so you absolutely positively have to have place management. You're fooling yourself if you think this is just going to somehow magically happen. And the other thing about place management is that many people say, well, isn't that what the city does? Well, to make a competitive, walkable urban place, the broad city standards of service for trash pickup, for safety, for festivals, for economic development, has to be the same throughout every portion of the city. You can't specially focus on just one to the detriment of the others. So if the people in the place want the place management, they're going to have to pay for it themselves and layer it on top of what the city already does.
And it, of course, relates to the concept of sustainability, right? I mean, there's self-interest here, of course.
Absolutely.
And it has to do with the performance of these places and how they're managed to perform. Just quickly, I just want to talk a little bit more about just walkability in general. And of course, in urban planning circles, it's kind of well understood that this is a goal. But I'm wondering if you could just offer your reflections as you've been studying and researching walkability in different places. Take us back to this core question. What is the benefit? Why are we so obsessed with this?
Well, first and foremost, the market wants it. And that's been a major part of my research over the years, both when I ran the country's largest real estate consulting firm, ran and owned it for 20 years, and then when my quasi-academic phase of life at Brookings and at George Washington University, that the market, there's pent-up demand for it. And it's going to take at least a generation to satisfy that pent-up demand. So it starts always, in my mind, with the market. But from a sustainability point of view, if you look at it from an environmental and social sustainability, it is where we're going to get, it's the number one thing we're going to do to address climate change. The number one thing we're going to do. And the reason for it is that it's a mere 42% of the assets in the economy. It's the largest asset class. If you don't deploy those assets well, you're either going to, you're going to get an unsustainable future, or you're going to get a sustainable future. And it's what's known in the business as the Green Manhattan thesis, that a writer for the New Yorker, David Owen, was living in Manhattan and said to himself, I want to go to a green place, to a mountaintop in Vermont, and enjoy nature all the time. And when he looked at his carbon footprint, he realized he tripled it by leaving Manhattan. That over 70% of all greenhouse gas emissions come from our buildings and our transportation systems that we use to get between our buildings. Over 70%. You move from a drivable suburban location to a walkable urban, your household will drop the greenhouse gas emissions by anywhere from 40 to 60%.
Yeah.
And so if it's 70% of greenhouse gas emissions is dropped by 40 to 60%, it's the number one way we're going to address climate change.
Yeah, and part of the framing of this conversation is really about how place relates to the Sustainable Development Goals and climate. Of course, we're having this conversation while the UN has convened in Dubai.
In that oil-producing state. Great optics.
Chris, I just want to drill down just a little bit more in this, because there's the carbon efficiency of place, which puts place at the center of decarbonizing economies and society as it grows. But there's also this place management coordination function of decarbonizing the existing city that we have.
Right.
And so that's a kind of a double challenge, if you will, or a double value of place management activities with respect to climate change.
Right. Well, as I say, that there's pent-up demand for it. So to a certain extent, it's a matter of giving the market what it wants. But unfortunately, in almost every jurisdiction I've worked in, both as a consultant, as a researcher, and as a real estate developer. My real estate development firm just delivered a 59-unit apartment building in downtown Doylestown, Pennsylvania, 2 blocks from Main and Main. And it's a matter of making it legal.
Yeah.
Most walkable urban development is generally illegal in about 98% of the land in a metropolitan area in the US.
Yeah.
It's so remarkable that we have put ourselves in this position. So first we have to make the right thing legal. It really helps.
And I do want to drill down into this again, this issue of market demand. And you've been so clear in your description of how people want to be living in environments that are walkable. And we know from many other surveys and other research that, you know, all things equal, people would rather live in a place where they can just walk around and walk to the store. They don't have to get into a car to go. Yeah. So, but we don't have enough of these places available for the demand that exists.
That's the problem.
So, reflect a little bit on the place, the pent-up demand, and the work of the place management organization. How do we break through? We, of course, have long conversations around design and policy, but it's the transformation of these places that is such hard work. How do you see place management organizations as strategic actors in meeting the demand that we know exists?
It's by putting in zoning rules and regulations that make the right thing easy. And you may want to make the wrong thing hard, but certainly make the right thing easy. When I was redeveloping downtown Albuquerque, I used to live in Santa Fe. That's where I raised my family, which is a fabulous walkable urban place, by the way, which is the reason I lived there. And that downtown Albuquerque was anything but a great walkable urban place. It was a classic American left behind to rot downtown. And we were trying to figure out, when we were doing the strategy for downtown, how to get the zoning to work to encourage the right stuff, what the market wanted. That's sustainable, walkable urbanism. And we looked at the regs, looked at the zoning, and we said, it's been built up over 200 years. Throw it out. Start from scratch. And we put in place a form-based code that had 21 principles. Each principle had 1 page with 3 pictures and about 3 or 4 sentences. And my favorite principle was that the front door must face the sidewalk. And the 3 pictures, because they were all from downtown Albuquerque, the 2 pictures that were what we wanted to show was what you would expect: front door, retail, right into the building. And so it was very clear from the sidewalk, and it was right on the sidewalk. The third picture we always had an X through it, which is what we didn't want. And it was the planning department of the city of Albuquerque who faced the side of the building to a surface parking lot. We don't want that anymore. And if you submit your building permit application addressing those 21 principles, you would get your building permit in 3 weeks administratively, no politics, and you just slice right through it, and you can start rocking and rolling immediately. So form-based codes are a really important thing. The place management organization should be in front of doing this. Why this is important is due to the affordability as well. The reason walkable urban places cost so much, as you correctly said, is that we don't have enough of them. There is, the National Association of Realtors just came out with a survey. They've been doing this for about 20 years. Every 3 years, they ask homeowners, what's your next house that you want to, and basically they said, do you want a drivable suburban large lot or a walkable urban small lot condo where you can walk to every place? Because those are the only options. That's it in broad strokes. And when they started the survey, about 1/3 of the people said they wanted walkable urban. This year's survey, 79% want walkable urban for their next house.
Yeah.
What's the supply side? In Dallas, it's 4 or 5% of the total supply. The best town we have is New York and Boston. It's probably 20, 25% is walkable urban. If 79% of the market wants something and you're only providing 20, 30% at best, what it does economically is it pushes up land prices in the walkable urban places. Here in Metro DC, we have 1.3% of our land is it legal to build walkable urban places. 1.3% in the entire region. 6.5 million people, 1.3%. And we jam all that high density stuff into that very small amount of land. In that small amount of land, we generate 52% of the gross domestic product of the region. And this happens throughout the world, where these tiny little high concentration walkable urban places generate a huge contribution to the GDP. And what cities don't know, and they need to know, is that they generate even more as far as the net fiscal impact. You know, the tax revenues minus the cost of services, the net fiscal impact, it's even higher than that for the cities. That they are generating, 50, 60, 70% of the profit from their business of running a city in that 1.3%.
Yeah. Chris, the place management organizations are in a position where they're dealing with policymakers and the issues of land use controls that you were discussing. They're working with their existing property owners of an area. They're also working with the businesses. They're working with cultural organizations that are, helping to program special events and bring life to places. It's an incredibly integrative function. Right. We think of that in a way that sustains a community, but what you're talking about is a larger market mismatch between the number of places, literally the kind of physical places that we have available for people to occupy and live in, and the number of people that want to be there.
Right.
How does that position place management organizations in articulating a voice of change, maybe advocating, maybe they're marketing, maybe they're kind of sustaining and integrating different stakeholders? How do you see that work in this both kind of very important strategic time as we talk about climate change on the one hand, and then also these kind of powerful market forces that are clearly at work in shaping cities?
So you're exactly right that the place management organization is the only organization, set of individuals that are looking at the experience of this place. That you have the city traffic department that puts lines down and puts up traffic lights, and you have people that are responsible for the signage, other people responsible for the parking, other people responsible for the transit, but nobody is focusing on the integrated experience, which all of us as citizens experience. Yeah. So at one point I was walking in downtown DC with our buddy Rich Bradley, and two things. One is he saw that a sign that had been put up was wrong. It was contradictory to the parking on the street. If Rich didn't spot it, or somebody on his staff didn't spot it, it would have been up there for decades. Yeah. And he did spot it. And he made a note, changed it. He also, of course, has a clean and safe function. All bids have that. And the clean function was out that day, power washing the sidewalk. And I said, Rich, wouldn't it be better to do this at night? He said, no, let people see this happens. This is not Dobie magically at night cleaning up all your dishes. We are doing this. We want you to know we're doing it. This is your tax dollars at work, which is, they're voluntary tax dollars. Yeah. But the other thing about place management is that right now, clean and safe always starts it, and then economic development, running festivals, and a bunch of other stuff. But the future is going to be managing all the parking, not owning all the parking, but managing all the parking, so that you'll have a sign when you're driving into the walkable urban place that says, we have 3 parking decks, turn left in 2 blocks and there's 235 parking spaces. Oh, now there's 236. Online, real time. And all that will be managed by the business improvement district. I talked about upzoning. We have to upzone these places and zone more places that can, not the 1.3%, but we probably need 5, 6, 7% of our land mass to be zoned walkable urban. And this, from a social equity point of view, is the most important thing that a place management organization can do, is to allow more supply to be brought into the market so it will drive down land prices.
Right.
The rule of thumb for housing, and has been for centuries, is that the land under a house should be no more than 20% of what you pay for the house. That rule of thumb has been around for centuries. And that still applies in many drivable suburban places. Walkable urban places, it's between 40 and 80%.
Yeah.
All the value in real estate puddles in the land. There's a thing called a residual land value analysis that documents that. And the whole reason it's 40 to 80% is because we don't have enough of it. But it's silly, of course, because here we sit in this country with massive amounts of land. And yet we have this artificial shortage of walkable urban land because we don't make it legally possible to do that.
So as a way of closing out, Chris, we given this economic conundrum that we're in, and of course this is a mismatch between policy frameworks and just the demand profile of people and households. How do place management organizations, and what special role do place management organizations play in negotiating social inclusion, social integration? This is so critically important.
Yep.
I mean, we're obviously in urban planning circles continuing to reflect on the very divisive practices associated with mid-20th century zoning. But today, this is another form of social exclusion, or is it? How do you see social inclusion in the market context of place?
So we have a clear lane so that we can build mixed income, walkable urban places. That first and foremost, the two highest cost or the two highest household spending costs categories are the house itself and transportation. The house itself in a drivable suburban location is going to be 20, 30, 40%. And then your transportation system, i.e. cars, in a drivable suburban location will be 20 to 30%. So you're talking well more than 50% of your household income is going to a roof over your head and driving your fleet of cars all around for everybody that is in that household. Very expensive. When you move to a walkable urban location, all of a sudden your transportation costs drop by about 2/3. My wife and I, we live in a walk. I just walked here from a downtown adjacent place to downtown. And we have one car between us. And we put on a massive 3,000 miles per year on that car. And this year is the year that we're going to decide whether we're going to dump it and go carless. So all of a sudden our transportation costs go to virtually zero. So think of that as a 20-25% pay increase for your family by living in a walkable urban place. Now, got to deal with the house costs. To me, the goal of place management is both economic and social equity. And the goal of place management organizations should be that anybody who works in that place, it'll be possible for them to live in that place as well, if they so choose. And that should be how these place management, every 5 years, place management organizations have to go back to city council to get reapproval of their existence. And I would suggest city councils around the country, around the world, not just look at the economic development and not just look at how much money they're making as far as their net fiscal impact, but also that you've got this goal. How close are you to meeting that goal from a social equity point of view? And, you know, the cards are stacked in your favor because you are, you know, everybody who moves there gets a 25% pay increase just by moving there. So, yeah, you've got a long head start.
Chris, you've really helped us understand how the activities of place management organizations are really framed by not only major goals that we have in policy and sustainability, but also these very important market drivers that are really a framing condition for how we imagine these places to emerge and how they do so in an equitable function.
Yeah. We can do it. And it's really, it comes down to management. It comes down to measuring both the economics and the social equity. You know, my new startup Places platform is focused on giving tools to place managers that they can measure what they're doing now. They can measure their, you know, how well they're going to do from an economic and social equity point of view as far as their 5-year strategy. And you can, on a periodic basis, every quarter, every month, every year, you can measure how well are you doing getting towards those goals. Because you know, so everything's managing place. And if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
Right. And it's all about incremental improvement, working towards the goals.
Incremental improvement, step by step. Yeah. And we'll get there because the market wants it.
Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it. We're just going to take a short minute to bring our next guests into the studio, and we'll continue with our final session. Thank you.